Before I begin, I want to ask you something simple. Tell me in the comments where in the world you are listening from and what time of day this story has reached you. It means more than you know to see how far these words can travel. And if my voice holds you until the end, remember to subscribe and keep walking with me through the stories that life often hides in silence. I remember the exact second my world shattered. I was holding her ultrasound picture in my trembling hands, the soft glow of the kitchen light above me flickering like a dying star. My best friend's name was scribbled on the corner of the document, and beneath it, the doctor's note revealed what I had refused to believe even in nightmares. She was pregnant, and the father was my husband. My knees gave way under the weight of the paper, and I fell against the cold tiles. The house was silent, yet my heart pounded like thunder, filling the emptiness with the echo of betrayal. I had just returned from a business trip to Chicago, exhausted but proud, thinking I had done the right thing by sacrificing days away from home to secure a better life for us. And in those very days, the two people I trusted most in this world had destroyed me. I pressed my forehead to the kitchen floor, the smell of detergent rising sharp against my nose, and memories of the past 12 years flashed like broken glass. 12 years of loyalty, of building everything from nothing, of holding on even when storms threatened to tear us apart. I remembered the promises whispered in our small apartment back in 2010, when we had nothing but a mattress on the floor and a shared dream of someday owning a home. I remembered the long nights of ramen noodles, the years of saving, the trips I took for work while he stayed behind. And I remembered her, my best friend since college, the woman who held my hand through heartbreaks, who sat with me in cafes in Boston during snowy winters, laughing until our ribs hurt. She had been my sister by choice, the godmother of my child in dreams I once had. How could she? How could they? I sat there for what felt like hours, paralyzed, every sound in the house suddenly amplified. The clock ticking mercilessly on the wall, the hum of the refrigerator, the creak of wood expanding in the silence. My phone vibrated on the table, and when I glanced at the screen, it was a message from him. A simple one. Landed safely. See you soon. He was on his way back from a short conference in Dallas, and I almost laughed at the cruel irony. He lied so naturally, as if lies were oxygen to him. My hands shook as I remembered the date on the medical paper. Conception aligned perfectly with the week I was in Chicago for that project. I had thought leaving for those 4 days was a sacrifice, a gift to secure our future. In truth, it was the very window they had used to destroy me. I stood up, legs weak, and staggered to the sink, splashing cold water on my face. My reflection in the window pane was barely recognizable. Swollen eyes, lips trembling, my skin pale and drained of life. I whispered to myself, why her? Why him? Why me? The questions fell into the silence like stones into a bottomless well. My chest ached as though someone had reached inside and twisted every nerve. I wanted to scream, to break something, to run to her door and demand the truth. But part of me already knew. The way she had looked at him at gatherings, the pauses in their conversations, the moments I had brushed aside as harmless. A woman doesn't mistake those things once her eyes are opened. And now, I could see the entire puzzle laid bare before me. I had been blind, too trusting, too consumed by work, by providing, by believing in loyalty. I grabbed the ultrasound again, my fingers smudging the ink, and suddenly her voice echoed in my head from the last time we spoke before I traveled. She had hugged me tightly, saying, "Don't worry, I'll keep an eye on him for you." I had laughed at the time, touched by her words. Now they cut like blades. She had kept an eye on him, yes, but in a way that destroyed every boundary, every sacred line of friendship and marriage. The betrayal was so intimate, so surgical, it left me breathless. And worse than the act itself was the realization that they hadn't just betrayed me once. They had chosen to continue. She hadn't just been careless, she was carrying his child. A new life built on the ruins of mine. I sat at the table, staring at the wooden surface scarred by years of family dinners, late-night talks, and cups of coffee with her. My throat closed, and tears fell silently. The memories of laughter in this very kitchen turned into ghosts mocking me. I remembered Christmases with her by our side, remembered how she would help me decorate, how she'd joke that she was practically part of our marriage. And maybe she always had been, in a way I never suspected. The thought made me nauseous. I rushed to the bathroom, barely reaching the sink before vomiting. My body rejected the truth just as much as my soul did. My hands clutched the porcelain, knuckles white, as if holding on could stop the world from spinning out of control. When I could finally stand, I went to the bedroom, the one we had shared for more than a decade. His clothes hung neatly in the closet, his cologne lingered in the air, his watch rested on the nightstand. All those objects suddenly looked foreign, poisonous, as if they belonged to a stranger. My fingers brushed over his wedding band, which he often took off before sleeping, and I felt a surge of anger I had never known before. It burned through me, fierce and consuming, chasing away the numbness. He had made vows. He had sworn before God, before my family, before hers. And he had broken them not with some stranger, not with a fleeting mistake, but with the one person who knew me best, who knew every weakness, every scar, every sacrifice. I collapsed onto the bed, burying my face in the sheets that still smelled like us, and I cried until my chest hurt so much I thought it would split open. My tears soaked the fabric, and I clawed at it as if I could tear away the memories embedded there. Outside, the world went on as if nothing had happened. Cars passed, children laughed in the street, the sun set quietly, but inside me, something had died, and I didn't know if I could ever bring it back. The night felt endless. I lay on the bed staring at the ceiling, the shadows from the streetlight outside crawling across the plaster like silent intruders. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them together. I saw her hands on him, his lips pressed against hers, the betrayal playing out in 1,000 variations my imagination couldn't stop. Sleep refused to come. Instead, memories invaded, each one now poisoned by doubt. I remembered the dinners we had as a group, the wine glasses clinking, her laughter echoing through the house. Had they been exchanging secret glances even then? Had every joke at my expense been a way for them to hide what was happening? My mind twisted every shared moment, turning love and friendship into conspiracies. Around 3 a.m, I sat up, my body shaking, drenched in cold sweat. I opened the drawer of the nightstand and pulled out the old photo albums I had kept from our college years. There she was, my best friend, smiling beside me in every milestone. Graduation caps tossed in the air, vacations to Florida, birthdays celebrated in tiny apartments when money was scarce. She had been there for every step of my journey into adulthood, into marriage, into the life I thought was safe. I turned the pages with trembling fingers, each photograph a dagger. How long had she been capable of this? Or had she always been waiting, silently watching my marriage until the right moment came? The sound of the front door unlocking jolted me from my thoughts. He was home. My heart slammed against my ribs so hard I thought it would break free. I quickly shoved the album under the bed and sat frozen, listening to the familiar creak of the hinges, the thud of his suitcase on the floor. His footsteps approached, steady and confident, as if he was walking into a life untouched by lies. When he entered the bedroom, his face lit up with a smile that almost broke me. He leaned down to kiss me, but I turned my head away, my jaw clenched so tightly it hurt. His lips brushed my cheek, and for the first time in years, I recoiled from his touch. He paused, confused. "What's wrong?" he asked softly, his voice carrying the same tenderness that once made me fall in love. I wanted to scream, to throw the ultrasound in his face, to shatter the illusion in that instant. But something inside me whispered to wait, to listen, to observe. So I swallowed the storm inside me and forced my voice to remain steady. "Nothing," I said, though it came out cracked and fragile. He studied me for a moment, his brow furrowed, then shrugged it off with the casualness of someone who believed he was safe in his lies. He unpacked, telling me stories about his trip, about meetings and dinners and hotel rooms. His words sounded like static, meaningless noise over the roaring in my ears. I nodded. I smiled faintly. But my hands were clenched so hard in my lap that my nails dug crescents into my skin. Every detail he gave me, every fabricated anecdote, was proof of how easily he could spin a life of fiction while mine was collapsing. The next morning, I woke before him, staring at his sleeping form in the soft light of dawn. I studied his face. The same face I once touched with love, the same lips that whispered promises in the dark. Now, all I saw was a mask. I wondered if he dreamt of her while lying next to me, if he pictured her smile while holding my hand in public. The thought made bile rise in my throat. I got up quietly, went to the kitchen and brewed coffee with shaking hands. The smell filled the air, bitter and familiar, but it no longer brought comfort. As I poured the dark liquid into my cup, I caught my reflection in the window again. I looked like a ghost haunting my own home. Later that day, she called me. Her voice on the phone was cheerful, casual, as if nothing in the world had changed. "Hey, how was your trip?" she asked, her tone laced with the same false warmth I had always trusted. I gripped the phone so tightly my knuckles went white. "Fine," I answered flatly. "We should catch up soon," she continued, and I could hear the smile in her voice. My stomach twisted violently. How dare she pretend? How dare she play the role of loyal friend while carrying the evidence of betrayal inside her? I hung up abruptly, unable to stand another second of her lies. My heart pounded with rage, and I realized this wasn't just about him anymore. It was about her, too. The two people who had built their deceit right under my nose. That afternoon, I found myself driving aimlessly through the city, the streets blurring as tears clouded my vision. I ended up parked outside her house, the place where we had shared countless moments of laughter, where I had spent holidays, where I had confided secrets. My hands trembled on the steering wheel as I imagined him walking up those steps while I was away, his knock on her door not as a friend, but as a lover. The image burned me alive. I sat there for nearly an hour, debating whether to confront her, to storm inside and demand the truth. But fear anchored me. Fear of hearing the confirmation from her lips. Fear of seeing the guilt in her eyes. So I drove away, my chest hollow, my mind spiraling deeper into the abyss. Days passed like this, me playing the part of the devoted wife at home, him continuing his routines as if nothing was wrong. But beneath the surface, I was unraveling. I barely ate, my body grew weak, and dark circles shadowed my eyes. At work, I stared blankly at spreadsheets and emails, my concentration shattered. I lied to colleagues who asked if I was okay, forcing smiles that never reached my eyes. Inside, I was rotting. Every time my phone buzzed, I half expected it to be her, another call filled with deceit. Every time he left the house, I wondered where he was really going. The paranoia consumed me, but beneath it was something darker, the seed of resolve. I couldn't live like this forever. I needed answers, and I needed the truth to bleed out into the open, no matter how much it destroyed me. One night, unable to bear the silence any longer, I pulled the ultrasound out again. I stared at the image of the child growing inside her, my tears falling onto the glossy paper. That child was innocent, yet a cruel reminder of the deepest betrayal I had ever known. My chest tightened with a strange, conflicting ache, grief, rage, and a sorrow so vast it felt endless. I whispered into the dark, "Why didn't you protect me? Why didn't you love me enough to stay loyal?" The words hung heavy in the room, unanswered, as if the universe itself had abandoned me. But deep inside, a flicker of something new began to rise. It wasn't forgiveness, and it wasn't acceptance. It was a quiet, dangerous clarity. The truth was out there, and it would not stay hidden forever. And when it came to light, I would no longer be the broken woman crying on the kitchen floor. I would be something else entirely. The moment of confrontation arrived in a way I never planned. It was a Sunday afternoon, the kind of day that used to mean comfort for us. Coffee on the porch, laughter over scrambled eggs, lazy hours with books and television. But that morning, I couldn't breathe in the same room as him anymore. My chest felt like it would implode with the weight of everything unsaid. I carried the ultrasound in my purse, its edges creased from being gripped so many nights in rage. I had rehearsed what I would say 100 times in my head, but the words always collapsed under the enormity of betrayal. He was reading the paper in the living room, the soft hum of jazz playing from the speakers. For a brief moment, it looked like a picture of a normal life, the kind we had fought to build together. But to me, it was an illusion, a staged play where every line had been written to cover the truth. My legs trembled as I walked toward him, and when he glanced up, his smile almost broke me again. That smile, so familiar, so practiced, so poisonous now. I didn't sit down. I just stood there, pulling the paper from my purse and slamming it on the table in front of him. The sound echoed in the quiet room like a gunshot. His eyes flicked down, and I watched the blood drain from his face as recognition spread. The smile vanished. His lips parted, but no words came out. He just stared at the ultrasound, at the handwriting, at the undeniable truth staring back at him. My voice was shaking, but I forced it out anyway. "Tell me it isn't yours." The silence that followed was unbearable. His throat bobbed as he swallowed hard, his eyes darting from the paper to me, then back again. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again, as if searching for a story, a lie, anything to erase the evidence. Finally, his voice came, low and hollow. "I made a mistake." Those words sliced me open. A mistake. As if betrayal on this level could be reduced to a slip, like forgetting an anniversary or missing a call. I felt heat rush through my veins, anger so sharp it nearly blinded me. "A mistake!" I screamed, my voice raw. "You slept with my best friend. You got her pregnant. That's not a mistake. That's a choice. That's 1,000 choices you made behind my back." My hands were trembling, but I couldn't stop. Years of sacrifice poured out of me in a torrent. While I was working in Chicago to pay our bills, to build our future, you were in her bed. While I believed in us, you were tearing me apart without even touching me. He tried to reach for me, his voice pleading, "Please, let me explain." But I stepped back, recoiling as if his touch would infect me with more lies. My chest rose and fell in violent rhythm, my eyes burning with tears. "Explain what? That you couldn't keep your hands off the one person who knew everything about me? That you chose her over me when I wasn't even gone a week?" My voice cracked, the sound of it breaking me all over again. For a moment, he dropped his head into his hands, silent, shaking. When he finally looked up, his eyes were red, wet, almost desperate. "I don't love her," he whispered. It didn't mean anything. I almost laughed, the sound bitter and hollow. "Didn't mean anything? She's carrying your child. That's not nothing. That's forever." I felt my knees weaken, but I forced myself to stand tall, refusing to collapse in front of him. "Do you know what I gave up for us? The nights alone in hotel rooms, the birthdays I missed because I was working to keep us afloat, the years I believed in this marriage while you—" My voice broke again, tears spilling uncontrollably. "You gave me nothing but betrayal in return." The house fell into silence again, the only sound the faint jazz still playing in the background. Absurd in its normalcy. My chest felt like it was splitting apart, but I knew I couldn't stay in that room any longer. I turned and walked out, slamming the door so hard the frames on the wall rattled. Outside, the air was cold and sharp, cutting into my lungs as I gasped for breath. I got into my car, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white, and I drove without knowing where I was going. I ended up in front of her house again, but this time I didn't hesitate. I marched to the door and pounded on it with a fury I didn't know I had. When she opened it, her face went pale, all the color draining away as if she had seen a ghost. Her hand instinctively went to her stomach, a gesture that nearly broke me in two. I held the ultrasound up between us, my voice shaking with rage. "How long were you going to keep this from me?" She stammered, her lips trembling, words stumbling out but forming nothing coherent. I didn't." Tears welled in her eyes, but I felt no sympathy. I stepped closer, my voice like fire. "You were my sister, my family, and this is how you repay me? You destroyed everything. You destroyed me." Her tears spilled, and she whispered, "I didn't mean for it to happen. The same line he had used. The same cowardly attempt to minimize what could never be minimized. My body shook with fury. You didn't mean for it to happen? You opened your door to him. You let him in. You let this happen. And now you're carrying the proof. She collapsed onto the couch, sobbing. But I couldn't watch. I turned and walked out, the sound of her cries trailing after me. My heart was pounding so violently I thought it might burst. I felt both empty and heavy, as if I carried the weight of 2 lives' betrayals inside me. When I reached my car, I fell into the seat and broke down. I screamed into the silence, a sound so raw and guttural I hardly recognized it as my own. I beat my fists against the steering wheel until they ached, until the skin turned red. Then, as the sobs subsided, a strange calm settled over me. For the first time since discovering the truth, I realized something. I was done being silent. I was done carrying their lies like a burden. The truth was now out in the open, and it would change everything. And as I sat there, my body trembling, my eyes swollen with tears, I whispered to myself words I had never said before. I deserve better than this. The days after the confrontation blurred together like a storm that wouldn't pass. My body moved through routines, but my mind was somewhere else entirely, spinning in circles, replaying every word, every look, every tear. The house felt like a crime scene. Every room carried echoes of laughter that now sounded like mockery, every object tainted with betrayal. I couldn't bear to sit at the table where we had shared meals with her, or lie in the bed where his arms had once felt like safety. Even the smell of his cologne on a sweater left hanging on the chair made me sick. It was as if my life had split into 2 realities, the one I thought I lived, and the one I actually did. At night, I couldn't sleep. My mind was flooded with questions, each one more painful than the last. How many times had it happened? Was it just once? Or had they met behind my back for months, years even? Did he whisper to her the same words he once whispered to me? Did she ever feel guilty when she looked me in the eyes? When she hugged me goodbye? When she laughed in my kitchen as if nothing was happening? The silence of the night was unbearable, and I found myself pacing, crying, whispering into the void, searching for answers that would never come. One morning, I decided I couldn't carry the weight alone anymore. I drove to my mother's house, the one place that had always been a refuge. When she opened the door and saw my face, swollen eyes, trembling lips, she didn't ask questions. She just pulled me into her arms, the smell of her lavender soap enveloping me. For the first time since discovering the truth, I allowed myself to collapse in someone else's arms. Through sobs, I told her everything, every detail, showing her the ultrasound like a piece of evidence in a trial. Her face tightened with horror, her hands trembling as she held the picture. "My God," she whispered. "How could they?" She tried to comfort me, but I could see the grief in her eyes too. She had loved him like a son, welcomed him into our family, trusted him. She had treated my best friend like her own daughter. The betrayal had spread like a poison, infecting everyone it touched. That night I slept in my childhood room. The posters still faded on the walls, the air heavy with memories of innocence long gone. I cried into the pillow until exhaustion pulled me into a restless sleep. When I returned home the next day, he was waiting for me. His eyes were bloodshot, his face pale, as if he had aged years in a single night. "We need to talk," he said, his voice hoarse. I stood in the doorway, keys still in my hand, and for a moment I wondered if I had the strength to listen. But I nodded, because I knew the confrontation was inevitable. We sat across from each other at the kitchen table, the same table where so many lies had been born. He reached for my hands, but I pulled them away, my eyes fixed on the wood between us. His voice broke as he began. "It happened once, just once, I swear it." His words hung heavy in the air, and I studied him, searching for the truth in his face. But his eyes wouldn't meet mine, and that alone told me everything. "Once is enough," I whispered, my voice cold, steady. "Once is enough to destroy everything we built. Once is enough to destroy me." Tears spilled down his cheeks, and he begged me to understand. "I don't love her. I love you. It was a mistake. and I regretted every second. I wanted to believe him. God, a part of me desperately wanted to cling to any thread that could make this nightmare disappear. But the image of her, carrying his child, stood between us like a wall that could never be broken. I shook my head slowly, my chest aching with every breath. Love doesn't look like this. Love doesn't betray. Love doesn't shatter someone's soul. He dropped his face into his hands, sobbing quietly. For years I had been the one to comfort him when he broke, to hold him through struggles, to remind him of his worth. But now, I felt nothing. No urge to reach across the table, no desire to soothe. His pain felt deserved, a mirror of the agony he had carved into me. In the following days, he tried to win me back with gestures. Flowers on the counter, texts filled with apologies, dinners cooked as if food could patch the wound. But none of it mattered. The flowers wilted, the words felt hollow, the meals tasted like ash in my mouth. I couldn't look at him without seeing her. I couldn't hear his voice without imagining the lies woven through every syllable. One evening, I found myself sitting in the dark living room, staring at the wall, my body numb. He came in quietly, sat on the other couch, and whispered, "I'll do anything to fix this." I turned my head slowly, my eyes heavy with exhaustion. "The only thing you could do to fix this is to erase what happened, and you can't." The silence that followed was absolute. It was then I realized something powerful. I was no longer fighting for the marriage. I was fighting for myself, for the years I had sacrificed, for the dignity they had stolen, for the woman who deserved better than the wreckage they left me with. That night, as I lay awake again, staring into the dark, I made a silent vow. I would not let their betrayal define me. I would not let their choices dictate the rest of my life. I would find a way to reclaim myself, even if it meant burning everything I once believed in to the ground. And as the first light of dawn crept through the curtains, I whispered into the silence, more to myself than to anyone else, "This is the beginning of the end." The weeks that followed were a battlefield of emotions. Every day I woke up with a new war inside me. Rage one morning, grief the next, numbness after that. Sometimes I would sit in the shower for an hour, letting the water scald my skin, trying to wash away the filth of their betrayal. Other times I would wander through the house like a stranger, touching objects that once held meaning, our wedding photo on the wall, the coffee mugs we had bought on our honeymoon, the blanket she had given me for Christmas. Each item now felt poisoned, heavy with lies. I tried to work, to bury myself in tasks and deadlines, but even the glow of the computer screen felt unbearable. Numbers blurred, emails went unanswered, and colleagues began to notice the change. I lied again and again. "I'm just tired, I'm just busy." But inside I was unraveling. At night, I would lie awake, my chest aching with questions that had no answers. Did they laugh about me when I wasn't around? Did she compare herself to me? Did he ever feel guilt when he crawled into our bed after being with her? The torment was relentless, a carousel of cruelty that never stopped spinning. One Saturday afternoon, my phone buzzed with a message from her. Just seeing her name on the screen made my stomach clench. I opened it with trembling hands. "We need to talk, please." My heart pounded as I stared at the words, my throat tightening. A part of me wanted to delete the message, to cut her out of my life entirely. But another part, darker, hungrier, needed to hear her confession. I needed her to say it out loud, to admit what she had done. So I agreed to meet. We sat across from each other in a quiet cafe we had visited countless times before, a place once filled with laughter and secrets whispered over coffee. Now, the air between us was thick with tension, her eyes swollen, her hands clutching her cup as if it were the only thing anchoring her. I stared at her, waiting. Finally she spoke, her voice shaking. "I'm sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen." The words infuriated me. I slammed my cup down, the sound sharp and jarring. "Stop saying you didn't mean it. You opened your door to him. You let this happen. You both destroyed me, and now you want to dress it up as an accident?" My voice rose, and people turned to stare. But I didn't care. My pain had no boundaries anymore. Her tears spilled, and she whispered, "I was lonely, and he was there. It It just happened. I almost laughed. A bitter, hollow sound that scraped my throat. Lonely? You had me. You had my friendship, my loyalty, my trust. And you decided that wasn't enough. So you took the one thing you knew would shatter me. My hand shook, but I leaned closer, my eyes burning. You carried my secrets. You stood beside me as my maid of honor. You swore you would always protect me. And then you slept with my husband. How do you explain that? She sobbed, unable to look me in the eye, and for a fleeting second I felt the shadow of the bond we once had. But it was drowned quickly by rage. I stood up, tossing a few bills on the table, my voice cold and final. You are dead to me, both of you. And I walked out, leaving her broken in the cafe, just as they had left me broken in my own home. That night, when I returned home, he was waiting again. His eyes searched mine, desperate, hollow. Did you see her? He asked. I didn't answer. I walked past him, my silence sharper than any words I could have spoken. He followed me, his voice rising, pleading. Please, don't shut me out. I can't lose you. We can fix this. We can get through this. I spun around, my voice shaking with fury. Fix this? There is no fixing this. There is no getting through it. You destroyed our marriage, our trust, our future. And you did it with her, my best friend. My chest heaved as tears blurred my vision. Do you even realize what you've taken from me? You didn't just cheat. You killed every part of me that believed in us. He broke down then, falling to his knees, his hands clutching mine. But his tears, his begging, meant nothing anymore. They were just noise. I pulled my hands away and stepped back, my voice low, calm, deadly. You don't get to cry. Not after what you've done. The silence that followed was suffocating. For the first time, I saw him not as my husband, not as the man I had built a life with, but as a stranger. A stranger who had invaded my world, stolen my trust, and left me with ruins. I realized then that there was no going back. No apology, no excuse, no promise could rebuild what had been destroyed. That night I packed a small bag, just the essentials, and drove back to my mother's house. As I pulled away from the home we had built, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The windows glowed softly, the house standing still as if nothing had changed. But everything had. My heart ached, but beneath the pain was a flicker of strength, fragile but growing. For the first time, I wasn't just running from betrayal. I was moving toward survival. I lay in my childhood bed again, staring at the ceiling, my body exhausted but my mind restless. I whispered into the darkness, I don't know who I am without this pain, but I will find out. And as tears rolled down my cheeks, I felt the faintest glimmer of something I hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. The days at my mother's house became both a refuge and a mirror. In that small, familiar bedroom with faded wallpaper and creaking floors, I felt stripped down to the core of who I once was. My mother tried to comfort me with warm meals and gentle words, but even her presence couldn't shield me from the storm raging inside. Every morning I woke with the same crushing realization. My marriage was over, my best friend was carrying my husband's child, and the life I had built with so much sacrifice had collapsed like sand between my fingers. I found myself going back over the years, dissecting every memory, searching for signs I had missed. The business trips I thought were sacrifices for us. Were they openings for him to betray me? The times she insisted on helping him when I wasn't home. Were those the moments where the line first blurred? I remembered a barbecue we hosted 3 summers ago. She had arrived early, helping him set up the grill while I arranged dishes inside. When I came out, I found them laughing together, their heads close. I thought nothing of it then, because trust blinded me. But now, replaying it in my mind, I could see the spark that must have already existed. My stomach churned as if I had swallowed poison. My phone buzzed constantly, his calls, his messages, his pleas. I ignored most of them, but one night, against my better judgment, I answered. His voice cracked on the other end, desperate. Please, just talk to me. I can't lose you. I closed my eyes, gripping the phone until my knuckles whitened. You already lost me, I whispered, my voice trembling. The day you chose her, You lost me. I hung up before he could answer, tears spilling down my cheeks. The hardest part wasn't just the betrayal, it was the emptiness that followed. For years I had built my identity around us, around him, around the partnership I thought was unbreakable. Without that, I felt hollow, like a house abandoned and left to rot. I stopped looking in mirrors because I couldn't bear to see the woman staring back at me, her eyes dull, her face etched with pain. Nights were the worst. Lying awake, listening to the old clock tick in the hallway, I felt like time was mocking me, dragging me through every second of misery. One evening, my mother sat across from me at the kitchen table, her eyes firm but tender. "You can't let them take the rest of your life," she said softly. "What they did was unforgivable. But you still have yourself. You still have a future." Her words struck something deep inside me. For weeks I had been drowning in what they took from me, but I hadn't once thought about what I could still reclaim. The next day, I forced myself to step outside. The autumn air was crisp, the trees painted in shades of gold and red. For the first time in weeks, I noticed beauty. I walked through the park where I used to jog, my steps slow, unsteady, but determined. I watched children playing, couples strolling hand in hand, and though it hurt, it also reminded me that life moved on, whether I was ready or not. Still, the wounds were raw. One afternoon, while scrolling through social media, I saw her post, a vague picture of her hand resting on her stomach. No caption, just a heart emoji. My breath caught in my throat. The comments flooded with congratulations, people calling her blessed, lucky, glowing. My fingers trembled as I read them. No one knew the truth. No one knew the child inside her was the product of betrayal, that the life she carried was built on the ashes of mine. I threw the phone across the room, the screen cracking as it hit the floor. My chest heaved as I sank to my knees, sobbing uncontrollably. But even in that breakdown, a realization struck me. The world would never know the full truth unless I chose to tell it. And maybe that was okay. Maybe their lies would weave into some story of happiness for others to see, while I carried the scar in silence. But I decided in that moment that silence would no longer mean submission. Silence would mean strength. I would not beg. I would not explain. I would not fight for scraps of dignity. I would take it back myself. That night, I opened my laptop and began searching for divorce attorneys. Each click, each typed word, felt like a step toward reclaiming my power. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was someone making a choice to no longer be defined by what they had done to me, a choice to step out of the ruins and begin building something new, even if I had no idea what it would look like yet. When I told my mother, she reached across the table and squeezed my hand, her eyes glistening with tears. "I'm proud of you," she whispered. For the first time in weeks, I felt a small spark of pride, too, fragile but real. As I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, I whispered to myself again, "This is not the end. This is the beginning." And for the first time, I almost believed it. The first meeting with the divorce lawyer felt like stepping into a cold new world, one where emotions had no weight and everything was reduced to papers, signatures, and terms. I sat across from her in a sterile office, the hum of the air conditioner loud in the silence, my hands trembling as I explained what had happened. She listened with calm professionalism, jotting notes, occasionally looking up at me with eyes that flickered between pity and resolve. "You need to protect yourself," she said firmly. "He will try to sway you, to stall, to bargain. Don't let him. This isn't about emotions anymore. It's about your future." Her words stung, because my entire life until now had been built on emotions, on love, on trust, on faith in two people who had betrayed me. But she was right. I had to strip away the pieces of myself that still longed for answers, for apologies that would never heal me. From that day on, I tried to think less like a wife and more like a survivor. When I served him the papers, his face turned white. He begged me not to do it, his voice cracking as he tried to reach for me. "We can fix this. Don't throw everything away." The sight of him breaking down should have hurt me, but instead it hardened me. I stood tall, my voice steady. "You already threw everything away. I'm just cleaning up what's left." I turned my back before the tears in my eyes betrayed me. The process was brutal. Meetings, mediations, dividing what we had built together piece by piece. The house, the savings, even the furniture felt like battlefields. Each decision was a reminder of the life I once thought was permanent. I walked through our home for the last time with the lawyer's checklist in my hands, touching walls that had heard my laughter, my arguments, my dreams. It was like saying goodbye to a ghost. Meanwhile, whispers started circling in our social circle. Friends who didn't know the full truth asked quiet questions, gave me sympathetic looks. Some even suggested reconciliation. They didn't understand. How could they? I didn't tell them the real reason, because the shame still burned too hot, because saying it aloud would make it too raw. Instead, I just said, "We grew apart." The lie tasted bitter, but it was easier than reliving the wound in front of strangers. One evening, I ran into her at the grocery store. My heart stopped when I saw her pushing the cart, her belly already showing beneath her sweater. She froze too, her eyes wide, her lips parting as if to speak. I stared at her, my chest tight, my throat burning with words I would never say. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, the scent of oranges in the air, but all I could feel was the chasm between us. Without a word, I turned and walked away, leaving my half-filled cart behind. That was the last time I saw her. The nights were still the hardest. Alone in my mother's house, I lay awake replaying the betrayal over and over, wondering what the child would look like, wondering if he would try to be a father, wondering if she would ever tell the truth about how it all happened. These thoughts haunted me, wrapping around my chest like chains. But somewhere inside, a shift had begun. The pain was still there, but alongside it was something new, the slow, painful birth of resilience. I started therapy at the suggestion of my lawyer. The first session was unbearable, sitting across from a stranger and saying the words out loud. My best friend is pregnant with my husband's child. I cried through most of it, my voice breaking, my body shaking. But the therapist didn't flinch. She listened, nodded, and gently guided me through the storm. Session by session, I began to peel back the layers, to see the patterns of sacrifice, of silence, of how I had been taught to carry the weight of everyone else while ignoring my own. For the first time in years, I began to see myself not just as a wife or a friend, but as a woman whose life had value beyond the roles others gave her. Little by little, I started reclaiming pieces of myself. I went back to painting, something I hadn't done since college. I sat by the window with brushes and colors, letting my grief pour onto the canvas. Sometimes the strokes were violent, dark, jagged. Other times they were soft, tentative, like hope. I walked in the park more often, breathing deeply, watching the leaves change. I even began reaching out to old friends I had lost touch with, people who reminded me of who I was before betrayal defined me. And then, one night, as I sat in bed with a journal in my lap, I realized something that both terrified and freed me. Their choices no longer defined me. Yes, they had destroyed my marriage. Yes, they had shattered my trust. But my story wasn't over. I was still here. My heart was still beating. My hands were still capable of creating, of building, of holding. The betrayal was part of my story, but it wasn't the whole story. I closed the journal and whispered into the quiet room, "I will rise from this." My voice was shaky, but it carried a strength I hadn't felt in months. The divorce papers were signed on a rainy Thursday morning. I remember sitting in that sterile office, the sound of rain pelting against the window, each drop echoing the weight of finality. He sat across from me, eyes downcast, hands shaking as he signed his name for the last time on a document that ended 12 years of our lives together. My pen felt heavy when I held it, but my signature came out steady, almost defiant. When it was done, I didn't look at him. I simply stood up, gathered my things, and walked out into the rain without an umbrella. The cold water soaked through my clothes, plastering my hair to my face, but it didn't matter. In that moment, the storm outside felt smaller than the one I had survived inside. In the weeks that followed, I tried to rebuild myself piece by piece. There were days when I couldn't get out of bed, when grief consumed me so completely that I thought I might drown in it. But there were also days when I felt a spark of freedom, a taste of something I hadn't known in years. Myself. I began making small choices that were mine alone. I rearranged my mother's garden, planting rows of tulips and lavender, feeling the soil between my fingers like a reminder that life could grow from ruin. I took long drives with no destination, windows rolled down, music blasting, the wind tangling my hair as if it were sweeping away the remnants of betrayal. One evening, I found an old box in my mother's attic, filled with notebooks from my college years. Pages and pages of dreams I had once written for myself. Travel, art, independence. I read them with tears streaming down my face, realizing how much of myself I had abandoned in the name of being a good wife, a loyal friend. I whispered into the silence, I owe her an apology, meaning the girl I used to be, the one who believed she could be anything before she built her life around people who broke her. News about her pregnancy still reached me through whispers, through mutual acquaintances. I avoided social media, avoided gatherings where I might see her face, her growing stomach, the symbol of everything that had been stolen from me. But sometimes, late at night, my mind wandered to the child, an innocent life born from betrayal. Would the baby have his eyes, her smile? I hated myself for wondering, but I couldn't stop. It was as if my pain had created a shadow family, one I would never see but could never escape. Therapy helped me untangle those thoughts. My therapist reminded me, over and over, that the child was not my enemy, that the blame belonged only to the adults who had chosen betrayal. It was a truth I struggled to accept, but slowly, I began to release the weight of resentment I carried for something I couldn't change. I realized that healing wasn't about forgetting. It was about refusing to let the wound control me forever. There were moments of unexpected strength, too. I remember standing in front of the mirror one morning, months after leaving him, and noticing the way my eyes looked different. They weren't as soft as they once were, but they were sharper, fiercer. They no longer belonged to a woman who lived in someone else's shadow. They belonged to someone who had survived the fire and was still standing. I touched the glass with my fingertips and whispered, "You're still here." I began journaling every day, pouring my story onto the page, not just the pain but also the lessons, the moments of clarity, the glimpses of resilience. Writing became my sanctuary, a way to reclaim the narrative that betrayal had tried to steal. Page by page, I found my voice again, stronger, more certain, and slowly, I began to feel the weight lifting. One night, while walking through the park, I looked up at the sky. The stars shimmered above me, endless and eternal, and for the first time in so long, I felt small in the best possible way. My problems, my grief, my rage, they were pieces of a much larger universe, and in that vastness, I realized that I was free. Free from him, free from her, free from the chains of a life built on lies. The betrayal would always be a scar, but scars are proof of survival. They tell the story of pain endured and strength found. I carried mine not with shame anymore, but with a quiet pride, because I had been broken, but I had not been destroyed. As I walked home under the starlit sky, I whispered the words I never thought I'd believe again. I am enough. And this time, the silence didn't echo back with doubt. It echoed with truth. Time became both my enemy and my ally. Months passed, and while the ache in my chest never fully disappeared, it softened into something I could carry without collapsing under its weight. There were still days when a memory ambushed me without warning, a smell of his cologne on a stranger passing by, a song we used to play on long drives, the sight of two friends laughing together in a cafe. Those moments cut deep, but they no longer bled me dry. They reminded me of the life I had lost, but also of the life I had chosen to leave behind. I started taking trips by myself, small ones at first. A weekend by the coast, the salty air and crashing waves soothing me in ways therapy never could. I walked barefoot on the sand, letting the icy water numb my toes, and for the first time in years, I felt a strange kind of peace. I was alone, but it wasn't loneliness. It was freedom. Nobody waiting at home to question me. Nobody whose betrayal lurked behind a smile. Just me, the ocean, and the sound of my own breathing. I reconnected with old friends I had neglected during my marriage. Sitting with them over wine, I laughed until my stomach hurt, realizing how much of myself I had silenced to keep the peace with him. They didn't ask for details. They just welcomed me back. And in their company, I remembered what it felt like to be seen without conditions. Slowly, I began stitching together a new identity, one not tied to being someone's wife or someone's best friend, but simply to being me. But healing was not a straight line. One afternoon, I saw them together by accident. I was leaving a bookstore when I spotted them across the street, her with the baby in her arms, him pushing the stroller. They looked like a family, the kind I had once dreamed of building. My breath caught in my throat, my vision blurred as if the world itself tilted. I ducked into an alley, pressing my back against the cold brick wall, tears spilling uncontrollably. It was a cruel reminder that while I was learning to rebuild, they were living the life that should have been mine. I stayed there for what felt like hours, shaking, gasping for air. But as the sobs subsided, something unexpected happened. I realized that I no longer envied them. I pitied them. Because no matter how happy they looked in that moment, their story had been born from lies. Lies wrought the foundation of everything they touch. And sooner or later, the cracks would show. I didn't need to be there to witness it. It wasn't my battle anymore. That thought gave me strength I didn't know I still had. Therapy continued to peel back layers I had ignored for years. I confronted the ways I had silenced my own needs, the way I had accepted scraps of affection while pouring out my entire soul. I began to understand that betrayal doesn't just happen in one explosive moment. It builds slowly in the cracks we choose not to see, in the sacrifices we make without demanding balance, in the love we give without boundaries. For the first time, I realized I wasn't just mourning them. I was mourning the version of myself who didn't believe she deserved more. So I began creating new rituals. Sunday mornings became mine alone. I brewed coffee, played my favorite music, and read books that had been gathering dust. I took long walks in neighborhoods I had never explored, discovering hidden gardens, small bakeries, quiet corners of the city that felt like secret gifts. I signed up for a painting class, sitting among strangers who knew nothing of my past. And it was liberating to be just another person with a canvas, not a woman marked by betrayal. And with each brushstroke, each laugh with a friend, each step into the unknown, I felt lighter. Not healed entirely, scars don't disappear, but lighter, freer, stronger. The weight of their choices was no longer chaining me to the past. It was simply part of the story I carried, one that no longer controlled me. One night, sitting alone under the stars again, I whispered to myself, "They took so much from me, but they didn't take me." The words felt powerful, almost sacred, as if I had reclaimed something sacred that had been buried deep inside. That was the moment I knew. I had survived the fire, and I was no longer afraid of what came next. It has been more than a year now, and when I look back, I barely recognize the woman I was on that kitchen floor, holding the ultrasound with trembling hands. She was shattered, bleeding invisible wounds, begging the universe for an explanation that would never come. I carry her inside me still, but she is no longer the one who defines me. I am not just the wife who was betrayed. I am not just the friend who was deceived. I am a woman who survived, who chose to rise even when everything around her collapsed. There are days when the memories still sting, of course. Betrayal doesn't vanish. It lingers like a scar under the skin. Sometimes I wake in the night and for a split second I forget, expecting his arms to be there. Sometimes I hear a baby crying in the street and wonder if it's theirs, if the child has his eyes, her smile. But the pain no longer drowns me. It's quieter now, like a distant echo rather than a thunderclap. It reminds me of what I endured and how far I've come. I've built new routines, new joys, small and sacred. I travel alone now, taking trains to unfamiliar towns, letting myself get lost in their streets. I spend afternoons in art galleries, standing in front of paintings that stir something deep inside me, reminding me that beauty still exists even after devastation. I've met new people, some friends, some passing strangers, who know nothing of my past and see me not through the lens of betrayal, but simply as who I am in that moment. That has been the greatest gift, the chance to be seen anew. Sometimes people ask about my marriage, about why it ended. I've learned to answer without bitterness, without shame. It wasn't what I thought it was, I say softly. It is the truth, and it is enough. I don't owe anyone the details of my wounds. I don't owe the world the story of how two people I loved most destroyed me. That story belongs to me, and I've decided to carry it with dignity, not anger. Forgiveness is a complicated word. I don't know if I have forgiven them. Perhaps I never will. But I have released them. I no longer let their faces haunt every corner of my mind. I no longer let their choices dictate the shape of my future. They live their lives, and I live mine. That separation is enough. That freedom is enough. The woman I am now is different. She is scarred, yes, but she is also stronger. She knows her worth. She knows her boundaries. And she knows that love without loyalty is nothing but an illusion. I once thought my marriage was my anchor, but now I know the only anchor I ever needed was myself. One evening I stood in front of the mirror again. The same mirror where I once saw a ghost of myself, pale and hollow. This time, I saw someone alive. My eyes were brighter, my posture straighter, my reflection not a stranger but a survivor. I touched the glass, smiled faintly and whispered, "You made it." And maybe that is the truest ending of this story. Not revenge, not reconciliation, not answers to every cruel question, but survival. Survival, and the courage to keep living, to keep dreaming, to keep loving again someday, if I choose. I've learned that betrayal doesn't define you. What defines you is what you do after. Do you let it consume you, or do you use it as fuel to rise? I chose to rise. So here I stand, not as the woman they broke, but as the woman they could not destroy. And as I step forward into whatever comes next, I carry one final truth with me, carved into every scar, every tear, every moment of survival. I was enough all along, and I always will be.